recipe is something that a lot of people probably think is difficult, but as again, I'm going to put forward the theory that it's actually quite easy. It's egg pie, or quiche, you might know it as. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to use this opportunity with eggs to do a couple of demonstrations of how you crack an egg and how you separate an egg. Now there is a theory that by cracking the egg hard on the edge of something like this bowl, you're going to force the eggshells into the egg itself and either contaminate it or get some shells in. Quite frankly, I've never really had a problem. Now, we are also, and I'm going to teach you two methods to separate the egg. When you separate the egg, you want the white in the bowl, and you want to keep back the yolk. So you may have seen your mothers or your grandmothers do this. It's just basically push the egg yolk back and forth between the two shells, and you've got all your white in the bowl, and pretty much you've got all the yolk. You might have a little bit of white. It's not the end of the world. Okay, now I'm going to put this back in the bowl because I'm actually don't need them to be separated. And another way that people crack the egg is by simply hitting it on a hard surface and bruising the side. And that then gives you a line in which to go with your fingers and pull the egg apart. Now I'm going to show you the second way to separate an egg, which is probably going to horrify you, but this is actually for those people who have trouble pushing it back and forth between the two half eggshells. You can just strain it with your hands. So you've got a full yolk, and that should obviously be in a separate thing. Okay, so now I've made my pie crust, and we're going to go and cut it out. Now, all the recipes are on the website, and also you can get a ready-made pie crust as long as it isn't a sweet one. Now, if you do not have a quiche plate, you can just take an ordinary smallish pie plate. I say this is about 9 inches, and you can substitute that. But of course, the typical quiche plate has all this fluting around the outside. Now, I've rolled out my dough, and I'm just going to cut the dough off, giving myself a couple of inches all the way around, trying to get it as neat as possible. Let's see. All right, that should just about do it. Now, this kind of a quiche plate, because of the fluting and whatever, that is going to actually help you make the fluting around the edge of the pie plate, because this doesn't really make a crust that comes up above the pie plate the way you would with an ordinary apple pie or whatever. Now I lift my dough up on the rolling pin and lay it down. You try and center it, but see, it's not going to be perfect. And pick it up around as you go around the edge, and with this part of your forefinger, just crimp it along the bottom of the pie plate. I don't know if you can see that. So I go all the way around the outside, or the outside of the inside. And then with your fingers, press into the fluting of the pan. See, now I have nothing above the top here, but that's fine because that's the way we want it. All the way around. Okay. Now, let's see if this works, because it can only be done once unless I go and make another pie crust. With your rolling pin, or you can do this with the quiche pan, is just roll it off the top, and this might not cut it completely, but it will give you the mark that you need. Because it squeezes the dough at the very edge of the pan and pretty much cuts it for you. You can see that, how easy that is to come off. I might have to grab a little bit here. It's fighting me. Okay. Come on, guys. Trying to show these people the best methods, and you're fighting me. All righty, here we go. See, it's really not that difficult. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back in with my finger and press it against the outside. And make sure that my flutes are fully up, filled in as well. And that's the crust in the pan. Okay, so now we're working on the filling of our pie. You want to take the cream and the milk and the 4 eggs beaten and put them in a saucepan and heat them on the stove for just a little bit to bring the heat up just a bit. The reason why you're doing that is because it will help the pie start to cook as soon as it gets put in the oven, instead of you having to wait for the heat for the eggs to come up to a proper temperature. I've made a note that this, because the recipe calls for buttermilk, you don't have to buy a whole quart of buttermilk just to have half a cup of buttermilk. Just mix, I think it's a tablespoon, it says it on the recipe, of white vinegar into the milk, and that will give the sort of the equivalent of buttermilk. So now I've heated my liquids. I'm going to put those in this pan just to mix, you know, this bowl, just to mix them. And I've got my cheese. What we want to do here is we just want to mix everything before we put it into the pie plate so that it's evenly done. Okay, put those on there. And I have 2 or 3 rashers, as they say in the UK, of bacon. Oh, and this is where this elevates it, because this is, there's no man in your household is going to refuse to eat this quiche. Just put the bacon in it. Green onions, as much as you like. This is, I think, 2. Or scallions, if you like. Now, the last ingredient, which actually makes this very, very moist, and it doesn't seem quite so eggy, are these black olives. Now, what you need to do, however, is you want the black olives to be evenly dispersed in the pie plate. And because they're so solid, if I put them right in this bowl, they're just going to shift around and do their own thing. We want to try and avoid that. So look at that. Now, I also suggest that you do this last stage as close into the stove as you can get. I don't have a kitchen there where we can actually do this so that you can see well. So I'm just going to show you. As a matter of fact, it looks like my scallions are not very well distributed either. They kind of go on in last. And so I'm just going to try and spread them out a little bit. I don't know if you can see that. I'm trying to get them evenly distributed. And the same thing with the black olives. You just want to come along and set them in. And they don't quite say, I think my table is chipped. There we go. That's a little better. And so place them evenly inside. And this is why I say do this as close to the stove as you can get, because see, now I'm going to have to get this to the stove. We'll be right back. We're back. We have baked our quiche. As you can see, that's what you're looking for in terms of the color on the top. And I've dished some out, and I've added what I call my guacamole salad, which is basically cubed tomato, cubed avocado with some red onion. You can add some coriander. I didn't happen to have any, so cilantro. I put a little bit of dry cilantro in, some chive that I had in the garden. And that's a perfect accompaniment, and you get some more vegetables. I hope you enjoy it. We're about to sit down and have our dinner.